We're joined by Marcia Hutchinson, who was mentioned there by Ekua, and also was a councillor in Manchester, but resigned, stepped down. Thank you for coming on, Marcia. What was your experience as a councillor in Manchester? I mean, Ekua was describing being disciplined for actually pointing out that there was racist practice. I mean, that's I can't get my head around that.
Yeah, I mean, it starts long before I became a councillor. I joined the Labour Party in 2016 and left in 2021. So I was a member for 5 years, of which the last 6 months I was a councillor. And I can safely say in my entire life, I've experienced more racism in the Labour Party than the rest of my life put together. And I've been around the block a few times.
Wow. So we're thinking Labour should be supporting and working to help people who are black women, especially, who are being attacked, as we've heard from those messages that Diane Abbott received. And actually, Labour's worse than the people out there in some ways.
Yeah, I definitely say so. Because the racism was much more explicit within the Labour Party. Lots of things that happen in the outside world, you think, was it, wasn't it? Not entirely sure. And I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who spent 20 years working in cultural diversity. I produce educational resources for schools to promote diversity. I was awarded an MBE in 2010 for services to cultural diversity. I've worked on or published over 20 textbooks. So I would consider myself an expert, not just lived experience, but professional experience. And yet I was subjected to the kind of racism that I didn't think existed. The kind of racism where people do appalling things, like Ekua and myself were the only 2 candidates to be women's officer for Manchester Labour Party, which is made up of 5 CLPs. So it sits above the 5 CLPs. We were the only 2 candidates. And at the AGM, 8 of the 53 people in the room, so they were voting live in the same room as myself, wrote derogatory comments on the ballot papers, folded them and put them in the ballot box. The comments were things like, they're both shite, neither, rerun selections. Now, they were doing this with me in the room. And when we complained about it, we got the same factionalism. Oh, you're sure it was racism? In fact, the outgoing chair, who herself is a woman of colour, spoke to the whole meeting and said, this is disgusting, it's appalling, this shouldn't happen, we're better than this. And the meeting, as soon as the meeting ended, the newly elected secretary, a white woman, came up to me and her first words were, it's not racist. Not how are you, terribly sorry. I was sat there dazed at what had just happened. And she said, it's not racist. And this is what's happening. The racism is explicit, and then you are gaslighted and told, no, you're imagining it. It's not racist. And a number of branches passed motions condemning what had happened. But a number of the more right-wing branches did exactly the same thing. Let's have a debate on whether it was racist or not. So you're re-traumatized by being told something that is explicitly racist. Now, there are actual laws against this. I spoke to a barrister who specializes in employment law, and he said what had happened actually broke the law. And yet we were told it's not racist. And initially, they refused even to investigate it. They even refused to acknowledge that Ekua and myself considered the behaviour to be racist. It was an utter farce. And I believe this kind of activity is deliberate because it takes up so much of your time dealing with it, fighting, arguing, wondering, did I imagine this? That you don't have much time to do much else. And I think that is the function of this kind of racism. It's a distraction. I'm paraphrasing Toni Morrison, but that's what it's about.
So, I mean, Ekua was saying that she didn't have much time for what she wanted to do, which was supporting the residents in Manchester. I mean, is that how you felt as well, that you could have been doing far more as a councillor if this wasn't going on?
Absolutely. So I was a councillor in Ancoats, which is the same ward about which an expose was written recently in The Guardian about Manchester City Council having gone into partnership with, I think, Abu Dhabi. I stand corrected, to create a company called Manchester Life, which owns a number of buildings in my ward. And it's registered overseas. So nobody knows where the money goes when all these people pay their rent. And this is a joint enterprise between the council and a regime that a lot of people consider to be extreme. And yet, I didn't have time to deal with that, even though my background is as a planning solicitor. So I was on the planning committee and I thought, okay, this is what I want to work on. This is my area of expertise. I want to make sure that any new developments which are granted permission, particularly in my ward, have social housing, have affordable housing, because Manchester routinely grants planning permission for developments that don't even meet its own criteria for affordable and social housing.
Wow.
So that's the kind of thing I wanted to do, but you're caught up in basically fending off the racist attacks. And I believe I particularly was attacked because I set up something called the Pipeline Project. As Echo was mentioned, when I joined, I think only 2 out of 96 councillors were from ethnic minorities. No, I stand corrected. Only 2 were African heritage. And given that 15% of the city was African heritage, we were massively underrepresented. So I set up a project. We were funded by the NEC. So this is a Labour Party funded project to increase the number of African heritage councillors. So we did training, mentoring, support, help people practice to be on panel and so on. And I was attacked for that. I was told, you, Marcia, are racist against white people because you've set this project up. When I supported people who had been shortlisted, who had been on the project, I was told by the chief whip that I should consider removing my tweet as I was campaigning against sitting councillors. Now, I don't consider saying congratulations X, who has been shortlisted in Y ward, to be campaigning against a sitting councillor, particularly as I'm the organiser of a Labour Party funded project specifically tasked with increasing the number of black councillors. And it snowballed from there because I refused to remove my tweet. In fact, I tweeted about the fact that I was now under disciplinary action for supporting black councillors. I was then accused of racism, anti-white racism, by old white men, including Sir Richard Leese, the outgoing leader of the council, and Pat Carney, the secretary of the Labour group. And it's like you've gone through the mirror and you're out the other side, because the normal process, as much as there can be a normal process, is if a councillor is accused of doing something inappropriate, a complaint is made to the whip's office. The whip's office investigates, and then only after they have finished their investigation, an email is sent to all councillors telling them so-and-so was accused of X, we've investigated, it's either proven or not proven, and this is their punishment. But in my case, long before any investigation took place, both Richard Leese, the leader of the council, and Pat Carney wrote to all 96 councillors, all 94 Labour councillors, telling them how awful I was, even though I'd broken no rules. And it just went on for paragraphs and paragraphs. It was so bad that I actually consulted solicitors and they said, yeah, we think you've got a case for defamation. But I, as a solicitor myself, know that the last thing you want to do is start defamation action. It will just take over your life. And actually, this is all whilst I was off sick with stress caused by all of this. So a new Richard Leese stepped down, so we were going to have a new leader. Whilst off sick, I asked if I could vote for the new leader online rather than turn up in person. And I was formally given permission to vote online. The next day, I heard from the chief whip, since you voted online, it's our opinion that you are well enough to attend disciplinary proceedings. So please give us a date within the next 7 days where you can attend proceedings. And I thought, this is ridiculous. I've given you a sick note signed by a doctor. You are not a doctor, but you are demanding that I come and attend disciplinary proceedings. So it's this kind of, what I kind of say lawlessness, as in, we know what we are doing is unfair, unreasonable, and probably illegal, but nobody is going to judge us on it. I complained to the whip's office, clearly they are going to exonerate themselves. I complained to North West Region. They referred it back to the Whip's office. When Echoer and I were both targeted when we stood as women's officer, we made a complaint to National and we got exactly the same thing. Oh, it was probably personal, which is definitely rubbing salt in the wound. You're attacked based on race. And the people who are supposed to judge this have said, nah, not really. But it took months of letters going backwards and forwards before it was probably personal. And I think the intention of that, because you're dealing with people whose full-time job, they're being paid to do this work. And the work is to stop you doing your work, and you're not being paid. As councillors, we get paid for 2 days a week. And it is designed to grind you down. It is designed to stop you being effective, particularly if you're on the left, because the last thing they want is councillors and probably MPs on the left being effective. And if they can literally tie us up in red tape and disciplinary proceedings, then it's a win, because they know we don't have the time to do anything else.
Yeah. That sounds exactly what Echoer was saying about them trying to demoralize you, and that your politics, your radical politics, or your wish to improve the community was seen as something that they didn't want at the same time. So they can kind of make out that they don't like, it's not racist, it's about the left, but they use racism to undermine your spirit and bring you down. So it is racism because of their tactics.
Oh, absolutely. Completely. It's straight out of the racist playbook, because nobody who is racist in the Labour Party is going to admit it and say, actually, I'm racist. Racism isn't about what you say. It's not about what policies you have in place. It's about what you do. So whenever accused, they'll say, oh, we absolutely abhor racism, like blah, blah, blah. But it's not about anyone can trot out a policy. It's like, what do you actually do when you have Black people in your party? And the answer is nothing. We not just tolerate the attacks, but we actually orchestrate them sometimes. So unlike Echoer, I don't think I've got the fortitude that she has. I decided to leave when it became clear to me that firstly, I wasn't going to get anything done around planning, which was one of the reasons I'd become a councillor. And secondly, the attacks were intensifying. I thought, actually, this is affecting my well-being. And even though I'm only 6 months in, I have two options. I can sit quietly and take the money for the next 3 years, which a lot of people do after they've been bullied, or I can walk. And I decided to walk. And by walking, I generated a by-election. And you would think that if a Black councillor left, putting out a press release saying, I am leaving because of racism, they would bend over backwards to make sure that the selection process for her successor was fair. They went the other way. They actively excluded Black members of the Labour Party from the selection meeting, meaning that a white man was selected as the candidate. And this is in a seat that was formally announced as being an all-women seat. So by excluding 3 Black members and including 2 white members whose membership subscriptions were not up to date and therefore who shouldn't have been included, they managed to get a tie. And then the next day we were told the white man had been shortlisted, and we were never told how he got enough votes to be shortlisted. As a result of that, because I had no intention of going quietly, Labour lost the subsequent by-election. So in February, a Lib Dem was elected for my old seat by a huge margin. I mean, I left a very, very safe Labour seat. And it's almost as if, given the choice between being racist and losing the seat, they preferred racism. And they almost lost a second seat in the same ward in May, because the candidate in May was the chair of the meeting where Black members were excluded. I didn't think she should continue as candidate, but my views don't matter once I've left. But she just scraped through. And this is a seat where I won by, I think I got over 2,000 votes, and the next nearest, the Lib Dems, got 800 votes. So I had a 1,200 majority, or, you know, about 60% of the votes. And they were they were willing to lose a seat rather than tackle the racism, because had the selection process for my successor been fair, I would have supported my successor. I wouldn't have, gone on record. But even white members of the branch made formal complaints, and we heard nothing for months. And eventually we were told, oh, we can't do anything.
Look, I'd love to hear more from you, but can you just let us know what you're up to now? I mean, do you feel better now you're not in the Labour Party and not a councillor for Labour?
Oh, 150%. I have to go at 1:30, so apologies for that. But what I've done is I've written a novel. I started the novel long before I was elected, just because I sort of saw what I was going through in the Labour Party to be so extreme and so beyond the looking glass. And I told someone about it, and they said, you should write a book about that. So I actually started the novel before I was elected as a councillor. And finished it after I was elected, submitted it to an agent. This is quite a large agency in London. And the first agent said, yep, definitely. So I've been signed with an agent. Hopefully the novel will come out next year. And what's ironic is that a number of the incidents in the novel, when it was going through the editorial process, she said, you've got to take some of these out. It's too much. It's too much to be believable. And I said, but it's all true. And she says, yeah, but truth is stranger than fiction. We need fiction here. So literally, I've culled a lot of the material from the novel to make it believable, because if you put it all in, no one would believe it.
That's incredible. Well, it's great to hear you, and I hope you can come on and we can hear about your novel and promote it widely and get it to the #1 in the bestsellers.
Oh, thank you so much.